My daughter Olivia stood at her baby shower and said, "This is the woman I wish had raised me. This is the only true grandmother my child will ever know." She wasn't pointing at me. She was praising her mother-in-law while I sat there, clutching the gift I'd wrapped with trembling hands. No one clapped for me. No one even looked at me as I slipped out of the room like I was already gone. But the next morning, something arrived at Olivia's door, a reminder that some truths cannot be erased, no matter how loudly you try to replace them. The night before Olivia's baby shower, I stood in my kitchen, my hands rough and cracked from decades of labor, scrubbing the same pot for the third time. My knuckles still carried faint scars from years of washing dishes in other people's restaurants, hauling garbage bags heavier than I was, and working midnight shifts at the grocery store just to keep the lights on. The smell of soap clung to my skin, but no amount of washing could erase the memories that lived beneath those calluses. I had bought a gift, a soft yellow blanket I'd knitted by hand. Each stitch held hours of careful work, long evenings where the television played reruns while I counted loops and tightened yarn, thinking of the little boy soon to be wrapped in it. As I folded it neatly into a box, I thought of the countless other times my hands had worked in silence, always for Olivia. When she was 10, her classmates went on a field trip to Washington, D.C. We couldn't afford it, not with my paychecks barely covering rent and groceries, but I sold my wedding ring, the gold band that William had slipped onto my finger decades earlier under a canopy of wildflowers. With the money, I bought her ticket. I remember her face when she came home with a small souvenir keychain of the Lincoln Memorial, holding it like treasure. She didn't know what it had cost me. I never told her. On rainy nights when storms rattled the windows of our little apartment, I would huddle her close beneath an umbrella so thin the fabric sagged. I would tilt it toward her, letting my own back soak through while she stayed dry. I remember her laugh echoing down the street, her shoes splashing in puddles while my coat clung heavy with rain. It didn't matter. I was her shelter. That was enough. I think of the winters when I worked 2 jobs. I'd collapse into bed just as the sun rose, too tired to cook, too tired to speak. Olivia would tiptoe into the room whispering, "Good night, Mom," even though it was morning. I lived off instant coffee and aspirin then, convincing myself it was only temporary, that one day she'd see, one day she'd understand. That evening, before the shower, I sat down at the small table with William's old notebook. His handwriting was neat, a little slanted, each word pressed into the page like he wanted to leave proof of himself for me. He had written something on the last page before he died. "Margaret, you are Olivia's only anchor. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. You have been more than enough." I traced those words with my fingertip. My throat tightened, and for a moment I let myself believe that William could see me, that he knew the battles I'd fought since he left. The nights when the loneliness was so loud it echoed through the apartment. The mornings when I forced myself up, not because I had strength, but because Olivia needed me to. I closed the notebook carefully and set it back on the shelf. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be a day of joy. Olivia was starting a family of her own. I had raised her into this moment, and whatever my struggles had been, they had led here. I wanted nothing more than to be beside her, to be recognized, even quietly, for the love I had given. The apartment smelled of lavender cleaner and the faint trace of stew cooling on the stove. I leaned against the counter, rubbing the ache in my wrists, and whispered into the silence, "I did my best, William. I hope it was enough." I didn't know then that tomorrow would not be a celebration. I didn't know that in a single sentence Olivia would wipe away everything I thought we shared. I couldn't have imagined it, not after a lifetime of sacrifice, of love, of bending myself into every shape she needed. But the truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would slice through me sharper than any blade. For now, I folded the baby blanket once more, smoothing the yarn with careful hands. I placed it into the box, tied it with a ribbon, and set it by the door. My heart felt heavy, but my hope carried me forward, because I still believed even then that love would be enough. I was wrong. Tomorrow my own daughter would stand in front of a crowd and erase me with a smile, and no one would stop her. The morning of the shower, I dressed carefully, smoothing down the wrinkles in my only good dress. It was pale blue, a little faded at the seams, but it was the one William had always said made me look like spring. I placed the gift box with the yellow blanket into a tote bag and took a long breath before leaving. Today, I told myself, was about Olivia and her new family. I would stand quietly at the edges, proud in my own way, even if no one saw. The venue was a rented hall, strung with pastel balloons and white fairy lights. Long tables brimmed with finger foods, cupcakes crowned with tiny plastic rattles, and pitchers of pink lemonade. Laughter filled the air, a current of voices overlapping, bouncing off the walls. Olivia stood in the center, radiant, her hand resting on her growing belly. Around her, people swarmed, friends from work, in-laws, cousins. I slipped inside, holding the box close against me, and found a chair in the back corner. From there, I watched. She looked beautiful, glowing in a floral dress, her hair swept up neatly. Pride swelled in me despite the nerves churning in my stomach. I thought, that's my girl. I made her strong enough to stand here today. Then came the toast. Someone clinked a glass, calling for attention. Olivia rose to her feet, lifting her cup of sparkling juice. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her. I leaned forward, my heart beating fast, already imagining what she might say. Maybe she'd thank me for coming. Maybe she'd share a small memory from childhood. Just one word, one acknowledgement would have been enough. She smiled, bright, rehearsed, and then spoke. "This," she said, gesturing to the woman beside her, "is the woman I wish had raised me. My mother-in-law, Veronica. She has been more of a mother to me than anyone else could ever be, and she will be the only true grandmother my child will ever know." The words struck like glass shattering. For a second, I thought I had misheard. The clapping, the laughter, the cheerful cheers that followed blurred into a roar in my ears. My daughter's voice, so sharp, so final, echoed over and over. The woman I wish had raised me, the only true grandmother. I looked at Veronica, who accepted the compliment with a gracious smile, squeezing Olivia's hand as though they were bound by blood. Then my eyes drifted to Olivia's husband. He didn't look surprised. He didn't shift uncomfortably. Instead, he lifted his own glass and clapped along, nodding like the words had been rehearsed, expected. Twist tightened into my chest. Had this been planned? Had they spoken about it before? The box in my lap felt suddenly heavy. My fingers trembled against the ribbon I had tied so carefully the night before. All those years, the ring I had sold, the storms I had sheltered her through, the nights I'd bled my body dry just to feed her, all of it vanished in that single sentence. I rose quietly. No one looked up. No. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked, laughter carried on. My gift box slipped from my shaking hands onto the table, a small thud muffled by the cloth. I couldn't trust my voice. If I tried to speak, I feared it would come out as a sob, a scream, or nothing at all. So I left. I slipped out of the hall, the sound of applause fading behind me. The cool air outside hit my face, sharp with the smell of autumn leaves. I stood on the sidewalk, my breath fogging, watching through the glass windows as my daughter laughed with her in-laws, her back turned toward me. She didn't notice. She didn't look for me. And in that moment, I understood something I'd never allowed myself to believe. In her eyes, I had already been replaced. I walked away, each step heavy, my chest hollow. The ribbon from the gift box trailed from my bag where it had snagged, fluttering like a torn thread. I didn't go back to fetch it, because what was left to fetch? Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it comes in a smiling toast, delivered sweetly while everyone claps. That's the kind of wound that doesn't bleed on the outside. but burns quietly inside you, deeper than anyone else will ever see. I ask you, whoever is listening, have you ever left a celebration, a dinner, a party, and realized no one even noticed the chair you abandoned? If you have, leave me a single dot. Just one. So I know I'm not the only one who's ever been invisible in a room that should have been ours. The night closed in around me as I walked home. The city lights blurred through tears I refused to wipe away. Each step echoed with a truth I didn't want to face. I had given everything, and still I was nothing in her eyes. But tomorrow she would learn that erasing me wouldn't be so simple. Because some truths, no matter how tightly you try to bury them, find their way back to the surface. After the baby shower, I didn't call Olivia. I didn't send a message or try to explain myself. My phone stayed face down on the small table by the bed, its screen dark. Days passed, then weeks. No one reached out. The silence was loud, but I let it grow, like weeds in an abandoned garden. I rented a small room above a laundromat. The walls smelled faintly of detergent, and at night the hum of dryers downstairs was my only companion. My possessions fit into 2 suitcases, and on the desk by the window I placed a single framed photograph. Olivia at 6 years old, her hair in pigtails, her arms wrapped tight around my waist. I would stare at it until my eyes burned, trying to remember what it felt like to be needed. The room had one lamp, its shade cracked at the edge, casting a cone of yellow light that fell across the bed and the floor. I would sit under it, knitting absent-mindedly, the click of needles the only sound breaking the quiet. Some nights I didn't eat. Some nights I walked to the corner store for instant soup, just for something warm in my stomach. Mostly I sat in that pool of light, feeling the weight of my absence in Olivia's world. No one noticed I was gone. Not her, not her husband, not even a message asking if I had made it home safely after the shower. It was as if I had been erased. One Saturday, restless, I wandered the streets. My feet carried me down familiar blocks toward the neighborhood where Olivia lived. I told myself I was just walking, but the truth was I wanted to see her, just to know she was all right, even if she didn't care whether I was. Her house came into view, neat and tidy, with flower boxes blooming under the windows. Through the open curtains, I saw her laughing, her hands gesturing as she spoke. Across from her sat Veronica, her mother-in-law perched comfortably on the sofa. The two of them leaned close, their bodies angled inward, their laughter overlapping like music. I froze on the sidewalk, half hidden behind a tree. My throat tightened as I watched Olivia rest her head on Veronica's shoulder, a gesture so intimate it twisted something inside me. They looked like mother and daughter, natural, seamless. The window was cracked open, and through it their voices carried. Olivia's words floated into the night, clear, sharp, cruel. "She only gave birth to me," she said. "She never really raised me." My breath caught. The words sliced deeper than anything she had said at the baby shower. Because this wasn't for show, not a performance in front of a crowd. This was private, intimate, the truth she believed in her heart. "She never nurtured me," Olivia continued. "Veronica did. She's the one who knows how to love me the right way." I staggered back a step, pressing a hand to my chest. The world tilted. The image of rainy nights, of sold wedding rings, of meals skipped so Olivia could eat, all of it shattered under those words. I felt foolish, like a child clutching a toy that had already been thrown away. I wanted to scream through the window, to force her to remember, to list every sacrifice, every night I'd stayed awake so she could sleep, every tear I'd hidden so she could laugh. But the sound caught in my throat, dissolving into nothing. Instead, I turned and walked quickly away, my shoes scuffing against the sidewalk, my heart hammering. The autumn air bit at my cheeks, and I kept walking, block after block, until her house was far behind me. That night, back in my rented room, I pulled William's notebook from the drawer. My hands trembled as I opened to the last page, but I couldn't bring myself to read his words again. They felt too heavy, too kind, like they belonged to someone better than me. So I took out my own notebook, a plain spiral-bound one I had bought at the corner store. I flipped to the first blank page and pressed the pen hard against it, the ink bleeding through the paper. If one day I disappear, I wrote, who will remember that I ever existed? The letters blurred through my tears, but I kept writing the sentence again and again until the page was filled. I didn't sleep that night. The words I had written, if one day I disappear, who will remember that I ever existed, burned into my eyelids every time I closed them. By dawn, the page was covered in smudges where my tears had dried. I sat in the dim light of the single lamp staring at the photograph of Olivia as a child. Her gap-toothed smile, the way she clung to me, it all felt like another lifetime. By late morning, I decided to pack, not because I had anywhere to go, but because the walls of the rented room felt smaller every hour, pressing against me like judgment. I opened the drawers, folded the few clothes I had, and stacked them into my suitcase. When I reached the bottom of the dresser, I found a thin box I hadn't opened in years. Inside was William's handwriting, his letters, his old journal, and at the very bottom, a folded piece of paper. The edges had yellowed with time, but his script was still steady, still him. I unfolded it with trembling hands. Margaret, it began, you have done more than any mother could. You have sacrificed and loved in ways no one may ever see. But if one day you are forgotten, if someone dares to erase you, remember this: truth does not require recognition. Love leaves its mark whether it is acknowledged or not. You have been enough, more than enough. The words blurred. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, my tears were not just from pain. Something flickered inside me, faint but steady, like the ember of a fire that refused to die. I sat at the small desk, the morning light spilling in through the cracked blinds. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, lined, weary. But for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer in my eyes. I thought, maybe William is right. Maybe the truth of what I gave can't be erased, no matter what Olivia says. I let the silence stretch. It was not suffocating this time, but gentle, like a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The notebook with my despairing words lay open, but instead of adding to it, I set the pen down. A knock startled me. It was soft, hesitant, as though the visitor wasn't sure if they should intrude. I rose slowly and opened the door. On the other side stood Mr. Harris, the old man who lived down the hall. He held something in his hands, a knitted scarf, frayed at the ends but still intact. I recognized it immediately. I had made it years ago, during one of those endless winters when money was scarce, but yarn was cheap. I had given it to him after seeing him shiver on his way to the corner store. "I thought you might want this back," he said, holding it out. His voice cracked with age, but his eyes were steady. "You made it for me. I never forgot that." My throat tightened. I touched the scarf, tracing the uneven stitches, remembering the night I had worked on it by lamplight while Olivia slept in the next room. "You kept it all this time?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," he said. "Not everyone forgets kindness, Margaret. Not everyone erases what you've done." The weight of his words settled over me. Not everyone forgets. The sentence sank deeper than Olivia's cruelty, deeper even than my own despair. I realized then that Olivia's rejection, though sharp and brutal, was not the only truth. My life, my sacrifices, my love, they existed in other people, in other places, in scarves, in meals shared, in the quiet ways I had touched lives without even noticing. When Mr. Harris left, I sat back down, the scarf across my lap. The room felt different, warmer somehow. I stared at William's letter again, and instead of tears, I felt a quiet resolve growing. I didn't need Olivia's acknowledgement. I didn't need her toast, her applause, her recognition. My worth was not tied to her words. Love, once given, lived on. It lived in stitches of yarn, in old men who remembered, in notebooks that held the voice of a husband long gone. That night, I didn't write a question in my notebook. Instead, I wrote a statement. I existed. I gave. And that is enough. I closed the book with steady hands, the sound of its cover snapping shut echoing like a small but certain victory. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. I didn't know yet what tomorrow would bring. But I knew this. My story was not over, and it would not be defined by the daughter who had chosen to forget me. The decision came quietly, not with anger, but with a calm certainty. I sold what little I owned, packing only what could fit into 2 boxes and a suitcase. The photograph of Olivia as a child, William's notebook, the scarf from Mr. Harris. These I kept. Everything else, I let go. The weight lifted as each item disappeared, as if I were peeling away the layers of a life that no longer fit me. I took a bus heading east, the landscape shifting from city blocks to stretches of highway, then to glimpses of the ocean shimmering beyond the trees. By the time I arrived in the small coastal town, the air smelled of salt and pine. The streets were quiet, lined with clapboard houses painted in soft blues and whites. For the first time in years, I breathed without heaviness pressing against my chest. I rented a tiny shop near the harbor, a space with peeling paint and dusty windows. It had been vacant for years, but I saw something in it. The cracked wooden floorboards, the wide front window, the way the sunlight spilled across the empty counters. It was waiting for me. With my savings, I scrubbed, painted, and filled the place with flowers. Roses, lilies, daisies, wildflowers. I called it Second Bloom. The name was more than a business title. It was a promise to myself, a second chance at life, a rebirth no one else had to see or understand. Customers trickled in, locals buying bouquets for anniversaries, tourists drawn by the scent spilling into the street. Slowly, the shop began to feel alive, each bloom a breath of color in what had once been gray. One afternoon, a group of young women entered, their laughter filling the shop. They asked if I could teach them how to arrange flowers. I hesitated, then laid out stems, ribbons, and vases, showing them how to hold each bloom gently, how to layer color and texture. They listened, they learned, and they began to come back, week after week. They started calling me Mama Mags, a nickname that grew out of affection, not blood. They sat in my shop long after closing, sipping tea, telling me about their lives, about breakups, disappointments, the ache of families that didn't see them. Their pain echoed my own, but so did their resilience. As they spoke, I realized I was no longer invisible. I was seen, valued, not as Olivia's mother, but as myself. At night, after locking up, I would walk to the shore. The waves rolled steadily, their rhythm a lullaby. I sat on the worn wooden benches, breathing in the briny air, listening to the crash and retreat of water against rocks. For the first time in decades, my mind was quiet. Peace settled over me, not the sharp edge of survival, but the soft warmth of belonging. To myself, to this place, to the life I had built. I smiled more. I laughed more. Customers began to comment on the joy in my eyes, though they didn't know the storm I had survived. Sometimes I caught myself humming while arranging bouquets, a small tune William used to whistle. I thought of him often, but not with the old heaviness. His words, "You have been enough," seemed to bloom around me with every petal I touched. But the past has a way of finding us, even in the quietest corners. One late afternoon, the sky turned dark with rain clouds. The shop was nearly empty, the last customers leaving with their umbrellas tilted against the wind. I stayed behind, gathering loose stems, wiping counters, stacking empty vases. The storm rolled in, thunder low in the distance, raindrops streaking down the window in silver lines. I was placing the final bouquet into the display when I felt it, the stillness, the shift in the air behind me. I looked up, my hands frozen around the flowers. Through the glass door, blurred by rain, stood a figure I recognized instantly, a shape from another life, framed in the dim light of the storm. My breath caught, the sound of waves and thunder blending in my ears. The bouquet slipped from my hands, petals scattering across the floor. I wasn't ready, not for this. The storm raged outside as the figure grew clearer through the glass door. I moved slowly, my heart thudding, until the bell above the frame gave a soft chime. The door opened, and there she was, Olivia. She stood in the doorway, her hair damp from rain, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a blanket, was the baby boy I had never held. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The world outside blurred into gray, the sound of the waves pounding against the pier. My daughter's lips parted, trembling as though the words caught on her tongue. Finally, she whispered, "Mom." The word hung fragile between us, almost foreign. She stepped inside, clutching the child closer to her chest. Her voice broke as she spoke again. "Mom, I was wrong. I said things I can never take back. But please, I need you now." She looked down at the baby, then back at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't do this alone. I thought I didn't need you, but I was a fool. Please, help me. Please, Mom." The sound of her voice cracked something in me. For a heartbeat, I saw her as the little girl she once was, standing in the rain holding my hand, looking at me like I was her entire world. My chest ached, 1,000 memories pressing forward, begging me to reach out, to gather her in my arms, to forgive. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and I had been forgotten too many times. I stepped closer, the baby's soft cries filling the shop. I reached out, not for Olivia, but for the child. He was warm and small, his tiny forehead damp with sweat. I pressed a gentle kiss against his skin, breathing in the scent of innocence, of new beginnings. For that one moment, I gave him all the love I had carried in silence. Then I handed him back. Olivia's breath hitched. She waited, desperate for me to speak, to stay, to break the silence with words she could cling to. But I said nothing. I only looked at her. Looked at the daughter who had erased me, who had replaced me, who had now come back not out of love, but out of need. The silence stretched, and in that silence lived every sacrifice, every night of hunger, every scar on my hands. She saw it. I know she did. I turned away. My steps were steady, each one deliberate, as though the ground itself demanded I keep moving. Behind me, I heard her gasp, a sound sharp with disbelief. Then came the sobs, raw, unrestrained. "Mom, please," she cried. "Don't walk away from me, not now. I need you. I can't." Her words dissolved into broken sobs. On the sidewalk, her voice chased me into the storm, pleading, cracking, desperate. I didn't look back. For years, I had begged in silence, for recognition, for acknowledgement, for love returned, and none of it had come. Now the roles had reversed, and still I did not turn. I reached the edge of the pier, rain soaking my clothes, waves lashing the rocks below. I stood tall, lifting my chin to the sky. The storm washed over me, but it could not touch the fire that burned steady inside. I was no longer the invisible mother, the forgotten woman, the erased. I was Margaret Ellison. I had given everything, and though she had denied me, though she had chosen another, my love still existed. It lived in the stitches of a scarf, in the petals of flowers, in the warmth of strangers who called me Mama Mags. I didn't need Olivia's words anymore. I didn't need her apology, because love had never been about her recognition. It had always been about me. Behind me, Olivia's sobs echoed against the storm, sharp and desperate. She was on her knees on the sidewalk, clutching her baby, broken in a way I had once been. The sight cut into me, but I didn't waver. Some wounds are not healed by returning to the same place that caused them. I walked on, each step carrying me further from her cries, closer to the quiet I had earned. The rain blurred the world into silver lines. The shop lights glowed behind me, casting long shadows that stretched and then disappeared into the storm. And I knew I had won. Not the kind of victory that comes with applause, not the kind people cheer for. No, this was the silent victory of a heart that refused to be erased. I didn't need to turn back. I didn't need to be claimed, because I had claimed myself. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.